Adebanjo comes in, you'll let him know that I had a plan to actually appreciate him for his stand on fairness, equity, and justice, and his contributions to Nigeria. Mr. Chairman, sir, the Executive Director of NADECO, USA, moderators, members of NADECO USA, distinguished speakers and moderators, distinguished ladies and gentlemen who are here from all over the globe. I bring you greetings from Nashville, Tennessee. In opening up this all-important conference, I would like to look at the characteristics of Nigeria, which make it extremely important in Africa and extremely important in the world. Such characteristics are in the political, social, cultural, military, and environmental context. In other words, Nigeria is not as bad as it's made to look, if only we can manage ourselves. Nigeria is indeed a great country, endowed by God Almighty, even as it came into existence as an entity due to economic machinations of the United Kingdom. It is for these endowments that it has been and is still referred to as the giant of Africa. What are these endowments? Is it the vast land? Is it the great diversity of its people and languages? Is it the huge population, which is the largest in Africa? Indeed, larger than all the West African countries put together. Is it the oil? Is it the arable lands? Is it the tons of other natural resources that Nigeria has? We are really blessed. The country was not set on a solid foundation since its birth. Was not a desire of the indigenous people who own it as their ancestral land. I dare say that the shaky foundation has been predicated upon an unwholesome understanding between the economic interests of Britain and the religious conquest objectives of the Caliphate. From 1804 in Sokoto to 1861 in Lagos to the 1914 amalgamation of the Northern and Southern Protectorates.
Is the volume connected here?
Nigeria has struggled with this faulty foundation over the years, up until the 2023 elections, which have been adjudged as the worst in Nigeria's history, and which has placed the country on the precipice like a cinder ready to detonate with cataclysmic consequences. This is where this conference must come in. We must be the beacon from this conference and guiding light for a Nigeria in which everyone feels accommodated and everyone has a sense of belonging. To make progress and achieve its objectives, Nigeria must move from its shaky foundation to a solid foundation built on egalitarianism, justice, equity and fair play, religious freedom, rule of law, and the yearnings of its people to be part of the governance structure. Nigeria has contributed a lot to Africa and the world, but I will concentrate more on agriculture, the oil economy, and of course, the peacekeeping efforts of Nigeria throughout the world. Nigeria has the potential to be a key exporter of agricultural produce. It has over 84 million hectares of arable land, larger than the size of Turkey, the Bayraktar country. But only 40% of it is currently cultivated. It has abundant rainfall and a labor force that can increase agricultural production. With continued reforms and infusion of domestic and foreign investment, this sector can grow to feed Nigeria and the wider world. Therefore, we must fight to make sure that these potentials are achieved. The country has shown its potential to nurture a growing entrepreneurial class. The emergence of Nollywood, a booming billion-dollar film industry, has been made possible by a combination of new digital technologies and a culture of entrepreneurship. Investing in infrastructure, which includes energy, transport, and telecom, to grow other sectors requires peace and stability, what is eluding us at this time. The country's infrastructure gap between now and 2030, the year of the SDG goal, is estimated at $2.3 trillion. Nigeria is the most important country politically and economically in West Africa. It is richer than all other West African nations and holds considerable power. Nigeria's most important export is oil, more than half of which is shipped to the United States. Rubber and cocoa are also important export products, and many others. Nigeria is a leading member of ECOWAS. It is also a member of the African Union and the United Nations, as well as the British Commonwealth. One of the greatest areas Nigeria has contributed and impacted Africa and the world is in the area of peacekeeping. Among the greatest contributions of Nigeria to Africa and the world is peacekeeping efforts, which include the following. I'm not going to name all of them. There are over 20 of them. Sending a battalion to Congo, Gunak, in 1960-1964. Military observers to New Guinea. There are so many places, including in the ECOMOG, in Iraq, in Liberia, in just name it, Kuwait, and so on. Nigeria was there. In Somalia, Nigeria was there. Yugoslavia, Nigeria was there. And so we have impacted the world with our peacekeeping capabilities and capacities, and the generosity of Nigerians in investing in these activities. The question, therefore, is how can peace elude the peacekeeper? How can we bring stability to this country that we own, the country that we hope to be the home of ourselves today and the homes of our generations yet to come? Over the decades, there has been a recurrent and sustained argument that the Nigerian state, like its counterparts in Africa and other countries of the developing world, underperforms due to lack of state capacity to deal with contemporary complexities of governance. We draw data from secondary and primary sources, which point to the failure of Nigeria in three major areas. One, security of lives and properties. Two, promotion of the rule of law. And three, provision of visionary leadership. We surmise that the nature and characters of the political leadership explains the Nigerian state incapacity for effective governance and consequently the quagmire we find ourselves in today. Let's look at the economic failures, for example. In 2016, Nigeria exported an average of 200 million barrels per day, more than half of which goes to the United States. Yet, it not only was unable to fully account for its earnings, it also could not put its 4 refineries beyond 10.4% capacity utilization. Nigeria has been referred to as a rich country of poor people. Nigeria is the greatest single developmental tragedy in the world today. The metaphor per excellence for a failed developmental experience is there, you have it. Today, oil theft is the order of the day. It doesn't have to be so, my people. Therefore, we have a job in our hands today to carve a way to move away from these failures, because we are on the brink of being classified as a failed state. We must reject the current gloomy outlook and fight to save Nigeria that we want. However, from the global economic indicators of about 200 countries, which include about 36 indicators, examples, the GDP and economic growth, business cycle indicators, consumption and investment, money crisis, and so on. There are about 36 indicators. All of them point to what? Nigeria as a potential failed state. One can surmise that Nigeria is a failed state. It doesn't have to be so. Again, this conference will guide us away and show us the way forward. What Nigeria must do to touch a silver lining. And what do I call silver lining? It's the golden streak in the sky. Meet its potentials. Those potentials is what has been eluding us in the past 6 decades now that Nigeria has been in existence as an independent country. Despite a well-educated elite and abundant natural resources, Nigeria has become a symbol of unfulfilled potential due to the leadership failure, weak institutions, and policy missteps. The ruling elite has failed to transform the country's potential into prosperity. As a result, petroleum-rich Nigeria can hardly boast of any meaningful or impactful developmental progress over 6 decades after independence. The country is still grappling with poverty, ailing infrastructure, socioeconomic instability, and underdevelopment. The situation isn't hopeless, though, as a new Institute for Security Studies report shows. 1, we must shift from crude oil back to agriculture. We must move away from violence, criminality, and other forms of insecurity, such as banditry. We must develop appropriate policies and determined implementation by the government to help the country's development projects. Nigeria does not appear to be on track to achieve most of the sustainable development goals set by the United Nations, and will probably have the highest number of poor people globally by 2050. This is scary. This conference must chart the course to ensure that we don't get to that. Nigeria is forecast to have a population of 450 million people by 2050, by which time it will be the 3rd most populous country globally. Imagine what we could do with that population if only we can prepare them for the future. Imagine the we could have on the world. And someone muted me. Okay. There has to be, for us to get out of our quagmire right now, there has to be about 5, and I will not spend time on them. I'll just enumerate them and we'll move on so that I can round up in a short time. There has to be about 5 sectoral policy interventions to prepare Nigeria to inclusive, sustained growth and development and prevent it from disintegration. These are improved governance and security. Like I said, the details can be made available. Demographics and human capital, an agricultural revolution, basic infrastructure and development, and finally, economic and export diversification. Of all these 5 intervention clusters, the last one on changing Nigeria's economic growth will have the most significant effect on Nigeria's long-term development projects and prospects and prevent it from failing. However, in the short to medium term, agricultural development appears to be the low-hanging fruit that would boost the population's well-being, generate employment, pacify the angry youth, and put food on the table. If bold and transformative actions are not taken, Nigeria will probably continue to lag behind in various economic and human development indicators and would stand the chance of failure. The challenge in Nigeria is not the absence of ideas and plans, but the lack of implementation. The just concluded 2023 federal and state elections offered an important opportunity for Nigerians to end leadership failure by choosing a developmentally oriented governing elite. Nigerians rose to the occasion and chose the right elite. This elite could have changed this country's trajectory through sound economic development practices, social services, and strong institutions. Once again, the Nigerian factor kicked in, and Nigeria bungled it. My charges to this conference, therefore, are: 1, we must work to ensure that the warped result of the INEC do not stand. We must work to retrieve the stolen mandate from the real winners of the election that everyone knows in Nigeria. We must work to prevent the scheduled fraudulent May 29 inauguration. Instead, we must work to establish a transient government while the tribunals do their thing. We must send a strong signal to the Nigerian judiciary to not bring to bear a contortionist somersault that will perpetually throw Nigeria over the precipice. We must work to give voice to the component ethnic nationalities of Nigeria or risk disintegration. We must call for the immediate release of our brother, Mazen Nnamdi Kanu, who has won tons of court victories and is still being held in flagrant abuse of the rule of law. This conference must point to the right direction. My people, I have only scratched the surface. In the next 36 hours, we must dig deep and come up with the panacea for unity, or the constituents must seek survival in other configurations. God bless NADECO. God bless all progressive forces that have refused to be cowed by the Nigerian ineptitude. Let us go to work. Thank you so much.